The ground is frozen. Not the soldiers, not the road ahead. The ground under her bare feet is frozen, and she is 9 years old and she is counting. Not miles, not days, footsteps. Her grandmother's specifically. The sound of them on the frozen ground just ahead. As long as she can hear that, she tells herself the world is still held together. Her name is Ayita. This is 1838. The road is not okay. Before we get to the road, spend a moment in the place she was leaving. Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina. If you've been there, you know the specific blue haze that sits in those valleys in the morning. The Cherokee called it Shakanaj, the land of blue smoke. Their name for it was 10,000 years older than the state names. They had towns, courts, farms, schools, a newspaper printed in 2 languages, English and their own syllabary, an alphabet that one man created in a single lifetime without ever having been taught to read. They wrote a constitution. They hired lawyers. They took their case to the Supreme Court of the United States. They won. Andrew Jackson removed them anyway. He used the word removal. That choice of word tells you everything you need to know about the people writing the documents. Not expulsion, not theft. Removal. A word that sounds like a procedure, like something being done to a splinter. 1 bag per family. Whatever fits, leave the rest. The thing about 1 bag that I keep coming back to, it wasn't the furniture that was hardest to leave. It wasn't the tools or the baskets or the years of accumulated objects. It was the specific light in a room at a certain time of day. The view from a window, the spot in the garden worn smooth by 40 years of the same feet. Those things don't fit in a bag. Those things don't fit anywhere. Ayita's grandmother stood in the doorway of her home for a long time before she left, not looking at the soldiers, looking at the room. The way you look at something when you're trying to decide whether looking is enough, whether looking will hold it. Ayita was 9 years old in the spring of 1838, which meant she knew her world completely and could not imagine it being different. She knew where the wild strawberries grew, a specific patch by the creek she had kept to herself for 2 years because she wanted it to be hers. She knew which stones in the river were slippery. She knew the sound the wind made through the mountain pass an hour before rain arrived. Not 15 minutes before. An hour. There was a sound, and then there was an hour of ordinary time, and then there was rain. Every time. Her grandmother had taught her that. Her grandmother knew the names of things. Every plant, every bird, every mood a sky could make. Not just the practical ones. The ones that didn't have a use. The ones you learned, because knowing them meant the world was yours in a way that didn't require anyone's permission. She said the blue smoke rising from the mountains each morning was the ancestors still breathing. That when the mist came down through the passes at dusk, the old ones were close, watching, making sure you were still all right. Ayita believed her. She had not yet been given a reason not to. The soldiers came in spring. This detail keeps striking me every time I come back to this story. It was spring. There were flowers. The world was doing what it always does in April, offering itself in every direction, and the soldiers moved through it as though it wasn't happening. The order was 1 bag. Ayita watched her grandmother move through the cabin in a way she had never moved before. It wasn't frantic. It was deliberate in a way that was harder to watch than panic would have been. She touched the wall where she hung the herbs to dry each autumn. She stood at the fire pit for a moment. She walked to the doorway and looked at the room. She picked up the clay pot her husband had made, his thumbprints still in the fired clay where he had shaped it. She put it against her chest and did not put it down. She left everything else. Ayita took her shoes off at the door, pressed her bare feet into the dirt. Her dirt. The specific dark earth of that specific place. And held them there, the way you hold the last of something in your mouth, before you have to swallow it, trying to memorize the feeling of it through her skin before the feeling was gone. The soldiers said, "Move." She put her shoes on. She did not cry, not then. She understood, even at 9, that weeping in front of soldiers was a kind of giving something away, and she was not willing to give them that too. They were supposed to leave in summer. The paperwork had promised summer. But the paperwork was being processed by people with desks and no intention of walking it. And by the time most of the Cherokee were on the road, summer had long gone. October had become November. November had become the flat, gray cold of December over the open American interior, which is not a polite cold. It does not accommodate. It does not care what was promised in the documents. The march was not a single dramatic event. It was 14 weeks of one foot in front of the other. That's what history flattens when it compresses this into a paragraph. The dailiness of it. The 14 weeks of waking up cold and walking cold and stopping in the dark and lying down on frozen ground and waking up cold again. Their shoes wore through in the first 2 weeks. Some people wrapped their feet in rags. Some walked barefoot on ground hard enough to crack stone. The government had promised food stations along the route. Most of the time, there was nothing when the column arrived. When there was something, it was often wrong. Delivered by people who had not thought hard enough about what 16,000 people walking 15 miles a day actually needed to stay alive. Ayita walked beside her grandmother every single day. The old woman never asked to rest more than anyone else. Never complained about the cold or the hunger, or the fact that the soldiers riding on horseback had the luxury of not understanding what was happening 6 feet below them. She hummed low, wordless songs. Not quite music, not quite prayer. The kind of sound you make when you need to prove to yourself that you are still there. I am still here. I have not been erased. You can take the house. You can take this. People began to die in the 3rd week. This is the part of the story that is hardest to write, because the language keeps trying to make it dramatic, and it wasn't. It was quiet. An old man sitting down beside the road who did not get up. An infant who had been sick for days who simply stopped. A woman who had given birth 2 days before the march began who walked anyway for 11 days before her body stopped. Cooperating. The soldiers kept a count. Numbers in a ledger. The names were not recorded. Ayita kept a different count. She counted names. She whispered them under her breath as she walked, the names of the people who were gone, so that they existed somewhere still. In her breath, in the cold air above the frozen road. She counted her grandmother's footsteps too, not because she was afraid, but because the sound of them was the sound of the world still being held together. As long as those feet were making sound on that frozen ground, something was still true. There was a soldier who rode on the right side of the column. He was barely 20. His name was Thomas. He was from Ohio, which meant the state where he'd grown up was half a mile to his left, and his family was there, and none of this was happening there. He had a daughter. She was 8. He kept her photograph in his breast pocket. Every day he rode past Ayita and thought about his daughter, and then kept writing. He did not write about the march in his letters home. He wrote about the weather, the roads. He was a thorough correspondent. He described everything except what he was watching. Some people cannot write what they know. It doesn't mean they don't know it. It means that writing it makes it real in a way that surviving it requires it not to be. At night, the column made camp in open fields, no shelter. The fires were small. Ayita and her grandmother pressed together under one thin blanket and looked at the stars, which were brilliant and completely indifferent. The stars were there before the paperwork. They will be there after it. In the morning, the column would form again, and they would walk again, and the road would keep meeting them, because the road never ran out. Ayita's grandmother died on a Tuesday in December. She sat down beside a frozen creek to rest. She had been humming that morning, one of the wordless songs. She looked at the water moving beneath the ice, still moving, even when everything above it had gone hard and still. And then she stopped. She started learning the new land the way her grandmother had taught her to learn anything. Slowly, by name, one plant, one stone, one bird at a time. She hummed the wordless songs at night, so her children would know them when they were older. She told the story of the clay pots so no one would forget where they came from. Some of her descendants are alive today. She built a life in that flat, strange land, and she handed it forward, generation by generation, until it arrived here, in us, in the act of saying her name out loud. History will give you the trail of tears in a paragraph. A policy, a date, a number of dead. It will not give you the strawberry patch by the creek that Ayita never told anyone about. It will not give you his thumbprints in the clay. It will not give you the sound of a woman humming a wordless song in the cold, because the sound was the only proof left that she was still herself. History gives you the shape of things. The shape is not the thing. The thing is a 9-year-old girl pressing her bare feet into the earth in April, before the soldiers made her walk away from it, trying to carry the feeling of it inside her body for 1,000 miles. She could not carry the earth, but she carried her grandmother's name the whole way. She carried everything she had ever been taught. She carried it into a foreign land and set it down gently enough that it grew. Her people are walking around today with her name in them, whether they know it or not.